Coming up on Network Africa, Zimbabwe's Justice Minister alleges that foreign forces are trying to destabilize the country. The court postpones corruption trial of South Africa's former president Jacob Zuma till May 26th. Plus, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says general elections will not be postponed to fulfill the interest of external forces. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. Let's begin the program with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Cote d'Ivoire's Prime Minister, Patrick Achi, returned to Abidjan over the weekend following a reported medical treatment in France. The 65-year-old said he was in good shape after spending 5 days in France undergoing tests for severe fatigue suffered since his appointment in March. State television showed Achi deplaning and being greeted by ministers on the tarmac and the commercial capital Abidjan on Friday night. He visited France for health reasons last week, but left prematurely to participate in discussions about the power problems. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Tunisia's capital on Saturday in support of Palestinians, calling for an end to violence as hostilities continue to flare between Gaza and Israel. Protesters marched across the capital, Tunis, waving banners, signs, and large Palestinian flags while chanting.
All countries show their support with this cause. Palestinians, we want to tell you that your message is our message, that your cause is our cause. Our first and only wish is to free Palestine.
Meanwhile, on Sunday, Egypt opened the Rafah border, crossing a day earlier than planned to allow the passage from Gaza for students and people needing medical treatment and other humanitarian cases. 3 buses carrying 263 people had crossed the border, which had been closed for the Eid al-Fitr holiday and is due to reopen on Monday. Even before Sunday's reopening, Egypt had been picking up people wounded in Israeli bombardments at a crossing. Egypt has so far sent 16 ambulances to pick up casualties, most of whom had suffered serious injuries that required immediate surgical procedures. Israel pummeled Gaza with airstrikes, and Palestinian militants launched rocket barrages at Tel Aviv and other cities. With no sign yet of an end to the worst escalation in years in the region, almost a week into the conflict, U.S. and Arab diplomats are seeking to calm the situation.
To our main stories for today now, Zimbabwe's Justice Minister has accused the judiciary of an overreach and saying that it had been captured by foreign forces in order to destabilize the country. This is coming after the High Court rules that President Emmerson Mnangagwa's extension of the Chief Justice term by 5 years is illegal. In a strongly worded statement, the minister, Ziyambi, said they would appeal against what he calls baseless and meaningless decision. On Saturday, the court ruled that Luke Malaba, who had just turned 70, had ceased to be Chief Justice. Now, the judges said that a recent amendment by Parliament changing the retirement age of senior judges from 70 to 75 had to be put to a referendum. Well, let's get more on this story. Joining us now on the program is Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Yamuthunbu. Thank you so much for joining us, Nigel. Please give us more details into this story. What exactly is Minister Ziyambi's argument?
Minister Ziyambi's argument is really premised on the fact that the litigants in this case, that is the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights and the Zimbabwe NGO Forum, Human Rights NGO Forum, which is basically a network of NGOs in Zimbabwe, supported and funded in their work by the international community and then so on. So perhaps the notion that it is foreign countries and so forth that are trying to destabilize the judiciary are just, premised on that argument. Suffice to say, there has been a development insofar as that case is concerned, in that the lawyers representing the Lawyers for Human Rights and the NGO Forum have since requested and written to the High Court of Zimbabwe to formally charge the Justice Minister with a contempt of the court. That essentially then makes commenting on the substance and debates put forward by the Justice Minister substitutes. But it is really going to be an interesting case to see whether it is going to be constitutionalism and rule of law that is going to carry the day in Zimbabwe, or it is going to be a rule by law and what has been put out by the ministry and by government. We'll wait to see whether that will have any impact on the independence of the judiciary.
Well, now, in view of this latest development that you have just mentioned, has President Emmerson Mnangagwa responded to this? We know the High Court had, ruled earlier that the extension of the Chief Justice term by 5 years is illegal. What has the President said about all of this?
The President is yet to pronounce himself on the matter. However, through his Justice Minister and spokesperson within the Presidium, there has been a strong indication of the thinking of the Presidency and the thinking of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. One, obviously, the ministerial statement, which by and large is opposed to the ruling and by and large emphasizes that our government is planning to appeal. They have that scope to appeal that case with the Supreme Court. And the Presidency, through the spokesperson, has also said that they've come out in defense even of the statement by the Minister of Justice to say it was within their rights as those that were cited as respondents in the application to proffer their opinion and to exercise their right to appeal. But I think it's going to be really a real test for the Zimbabwe's democratic system, in particular the independence of the three arms of the state, and also in particular the interpretation of the Constitution, which has likelihood of setting a precedent in the country going forward in terms of implementation of the Constitution.
All right, then we'll just have to wait and see how it all pans out. But thank you so much, Nigel Yamuthunbu, Zimbabwean journalist, joining us there from Harare. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, the trial of former South African President Jacob Zuma, which began today in Pietermaritzburg after many years of delay and intrigue, has been adjourned to May 26th. This is to give room for the defense to properly file a request for the prosecutor, Billy Downer, to recuse himself based on Section 106.1H, which states that the prosecutor has no title to prosecute. Mr. Zuma and French Arms Company Whitney Tales are co-accused in this case, in which the former president faces 18 charges of fraud, money laundering and racketeering in a 1999 arms deal. Our South Africa Bureau Chief Betty Dibia, who was at the court, now reports.
Years of delay and intrigue, just when we thought that everything was good to go, an issue was raised in court today. In essence, the defense led by Mr. Tabani Masuku wants the lead prosecutor, Billy Downey, to recuse himself based on Section 106(1)H of the Criminal Procedures Act.
I might just put on record, as we indicated to your Lordship in Chambers, that my learned friend, Mr. Masuku, informed me last week that they intended bringing, on behalf of Mr. Zuma, an application for me as the prosecutor, the lead prosecutor together, who's, as the lead prosecutor, for me to be recused or to recuse myself. And we were promised that papers would come only today. I haven't seen them yet, my lord.
As I understand the position then, this is not an application for your recusal. What is being raised in the context of Section 106(1)H as a plea.
We agree with your lordship. It will accommodate the view that we had that this is a plea which comes immediately after charges have been read to the accused, and the accused pleads this particular plea.
This trial is then adjourned to the 26th of May 2021, back here in Pietermaritzburg in this courtroom, and the accused are warned to be present on that day, and as previously discussed, it's contemplated that on that day the plea will be recorded.
For now, all sides say they are ready to proceed with the case come the next court date. Hopefully that will be the case.
It's all systems go from the state side. In fact, we even have our first witness, who is the minister in the cabinet. She is going to set the scene. She's going to give her evidence in chief.
The current Public Works Minister, Patricia de Lille, who was the whistleblower 22 years ago, is expected to be the first witness for the state.
I'm very relieved that after 22 years we are finally starting. It's very important that South Africans find out what is the truth. Former President Jacob Zuma be afforded to state his side of the case, and then hopefully we can bring closure to this.
Inside and outside the court, there was a heavy ANC presence, mostly in support of Mr. Zuma, and family as well.
No, I think we all saw what the judge did. That's good. We'll be back on the 26th, and that's all we can say at this point.
The traditional pro-Zuma stomp outside the court was complete with an interesting array of big players on one side of a very divided African National Congress. From the Pietermaritzburg High Court, KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
South Africa has begun its second phase of the COVID-19 vaccine rollout on Monday morning, with those over the age of 60 being prioritized. Minister of Health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, together with the Premier of Gauteng Province, visited one of the vaccine sites to oversee the vaccine rollout and ensure that all is on track. Minister Mkhize outlined government's plans and targets of the number of people they would like to reach in this second phase. The minister also assured people that the vaccine's been administered after the Johnson & Johnson jabs were temporarily suspended due to reports of blood clots in patients who had taken the vaccine.
This phase 2 is supposed to give us 16.5 million people that must be vaccinated. We want to push for that as much as possible. So we do know that people have been waiting for long for these vaccines. We do know that people are still wanting to get the vaccines now, but we are pleading for patience, and we are really thanking South Africans for working with us until this process kicks in at the point at which we are. We know that we would have loved to have the vaccines as early as January or December last year. It was not possible, but now it is here. Let's make use of it. Let's also work together because what a number of people need to understand is that if we go into these phases, then there'll be no clogging of the system, there'll be no jumping of the queue. We'll clear people and deal with them as quickly as possible. Many people have been worried whether we will be able to reach the targets. I'm saying we're going for our targets. Whatever happens, we have to push. But we do know now that on the latest estimations, it's going to take us up until the first part of 2022. Now that Johnson & Johnson was delayed, we then had to put up an emergency arrangement. But we're expecting that the Johnson & Johnson, those vaccines should be released. We're hoping sometime this week. I'm going to be having a meeting with Johnson & Johnson Global Office by Wednesday. So we will know after Wednesday exactly when they will release them. The vaccines are ready, they're manufactured, we know they're not contaminated, we know they're safe, we know they're available. They're just waiting for the global audit process to be concluded. And they
Still ahead on the program. Former DR Congo child refugee 19-year-old Tuesday to represent Sweden in the Eurovision Song Contest on Tuesday in the first semi-final of the competition. Welcome back to the program. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has said that he will not allow the delayed general election to be used to fulfill the interest of external forces. He made this known while inaugurating an industrial park in Afar regional state. Mr. Abiy is accusing some unnamed powerful countries of waging a campaign against his country. He says countries with strong economy or other entities are in a campaign against Ethiopia with the aim to decide how Ethiopians should live, adding that Ethiopians have never fallen under forces and will never fall. Ethiopia in the recent times has come under pressure from the US and European Union over alleged human rights abuses and the humanitarian crisis in the northern Tigray region, where federal forces ousted the rebellious former regional governing party, the TPLF, in November 2020. The son of long-serving Congo-Brazzaville President Denis Sassou Nguesso has been named minister in a new cabinet lineup. Denis Christel Sassou Nguesso is to head the newly created Ministry of International Cooperation. The new government, announced by Prime Minister Anatole Colinet Makosso, has 36 members, including 4 ministers and 8 women. The new appointments follow the president's re-election in March. Now, the president has been in power since 1979, except for a 5-year period after losing elections in 1992. The French government has said it will lend Sudan $1.5 billion to help the country pay off its arrears to the International Monetary Fund. Now, this could pave the way for much of the country's $50 billion external debt to be forgiven under the IMF and World Bank's highly indebted poor countries scheme. Sudan is emerging from decades of economic sanctions and isolation under former President Omar al-Bashir, who was ousted following protests 2 years ago. The transitional government, led by Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, is now trying to steer the country out of its deep economic crisis with an inflation of more than 300%. I beg your pardon. Well, Egyptian Tourism and Antiquities Minister Khalid El Nani is saying the country is optimistic about welcoming more visitors this year, with numbers increasing steadily since January to around 500,000 tourists a month. Egypt and Russia back in April both agreed to resume all flights between the two countries in a call between both presidents. The tourism revenue is an important source of foreign currency for Egypt, but unfortunately it plunged by 70% in 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. Tourism usually accounts for up to 15% of the country's gross domestic profit.
Very optimistic about the resumption, because we received about 3 million tourists since the resumption, since the beginning of July 2020. But the numbers are increasing since January 2021. Now we are receiving around 500,000 tourists per month. More than 65% of them are coming to the Red Sea and the South Sinai Governorate because they are open air spaces and water activities, and it's exactly what the tourist is seeking after the COVID. As for the revenue, now we are running around 50% of our numbers before the pandemic. So it's a loss of 50% of our income, around $500,000 per month. What's very positive is that the numbers of tourists are increasing. March is 25% more than February. April is about 15% more than March. So this last April it was around 525,000 tourists per month. So we are very glad. It's almost more than 50% of our numbers before the pandemic. So I hope by the end of the year we'll be recovering.
Now, a decade after being granted asylum in Sweden, 19-year-old Tusin Chiza is representing his host adopted country at the Eurovision Song Contest in Rotterdam on Tuesday. Tusin, or Tuse as he's known in Sweden, was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He fled to a refugee camp in Uganda at the age of 5 with his family, and he lived there for 3 years before moving to Sweden at the age of 8. He says it's a huge honor for him, and it's like a way of saying his biggest thank you to Sweden, the Nordic country.
For Tuse, Sweden's 2021 Eurovision Song Contest contender, it felt like entering a new world coming to the Nordic country at the age of 8 from a Ugandan refugee camp. 19-year-old Tuse, short for Tusin Chiza, will represent Sweden in the Eurovision Song Contest in the Netherlands with the song Voices, and he will take the stage on Tuesday, May 18th, in the first semi-final of the competition. Born in the Democratic Republic of Congo and separated from his parents at the age of 5 during an attempted escape from the civil war-torn African country, he spent 3 years in a refugee camp with an aunt before being granted asylum in Sweden.
The difference is huge. From going from the refugee camp where you didn't know, you had no idea where your next meal would be, or if there were any food, to Sweden, which there's plenty of food, plenty of water. You don't have to worry about those kinds of things. It's really cold here. I'll let you down.
Having sung throughout his childhood in Africa, mainly in church choirs where he wished he was the minister so he could perform solos to the congregation, Tuse kept singing in Sweden, in choirs, and eventually in talent contests such as Swedish Idol, which he won in 2019. He found out a few years ago that his biological parents were still alive, although his mother has since died.
I grew up, thinking my parents were gone and ultimately thinking that they were dead. So to actually find out that they were alive and well, and they got in touch with me for the first time again, it was huge. Just so much joy and just happiness, because there was something always missing in my heart, and it kind of,
He said his father had been cheering him during the Swedish Eurovision qualifier contests, and he plans to travel to meet his father once the coronavirus pandemic restrictions are lifted. This year's Eurovision Song Contest, one of the world's biggest annual television events, will take place in Rotterdam from May 18 to 22, following the Netherlands' victory in 2019 with the song Arcade. The event will have a limited live audience after the 2020 edition was cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.